Welcome to the Women's Money Wisdom Podcast. I'm Melissa Joy, a certified financial planner and the founder of Pearl Planning. My goal is to help you streamline and organize your finances, navigate big money decisions with confidence, and be strategic in order to grow your wealth. As a woman, you work hard for your money, and I'm here to help you make the most of it. Now, let's get into the show. Welcome back to the Women's Money Wisdom Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking all about what you need to be thinking about, how to frame conversations with yourself when it comes to retiring in your 50s or 60s, sometimes retiring even earlier than traditional retirement ages. And I'm thrilled to be joined by a friend and fellow financial planning practitioner, Bridget Grimes. Bridget is really a mover and a shaker in the financial planning world, especially as an advocate for women and women financial advisors. She is the founder of Wealth Choice, a financial firm for breadwinner women, and the co-founder of Equita Financial Network, a community of independent, fee-only women-led financial planning firms. And she is also a CFP Board Ambassador, which is a big deal in and of itself. Bridget, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, I'm so glad that you joined me. You sent a newsletter out, and I'm on your newsletter list recently. And the headline of the newsletter was What Women Need to Know About Retiring in Their 50s or 60s. And immediately, I think I shot you an email and said, Bridget, you need to come on the podcast. This is exactly what my listeners and me myself are interested in talking about and hearing about. And I hear it so much in client conversations like, okay, what does retirement really look like? I've never really thought about it, but now I want to get serious about it. Or maybe even I want to retire earlier than I ever thought I would. So tell me, why did what brought you to that newsletter? And are you having the same conversations with your friends and clients?
Yeah. And thanks for asking. So, and I loved that we tackled that topic because, as you and I talked about before, a lot of our clients of Wealth Choice are really trying to prepare to retire early. So it's different for everybody, right? But this is something that we deal with all the time from a planning perspective. So yeah, we thought, let's share with other folks like what we're doing over here and things for people to consider.
Yes.
Yep.
And for me, and I think maybe the same for you, traditional retirement ages, well, back in the day, it was like 65, which was Medicare age, and full retirement age for Social Security. It's changed a little bit on the Social Security numbers. Now it's like you punch in, go to work till your 60s, um, and then call it a day. But what are you seeing in terms of like ranges of retirement ages nowadays?
Yeah, great question. So our client base tends to be on the younger side, right? They're folks in 30s who are, young. I consider 30s young, but they're, a lot of stop awards. They've managed to get some money up until 50s. Like that's, peak earning years for our women. So we kind of cover the gamut. But what is really interesting is that we notice with a lot of our younger clients that they would love to have the option to stop earning way earlier than older folks, right? So there's a trend we see among our clients. And so everything that we do as planners starts with, okay, what's your intention? What would you like life to look like, right? And so many of these women are like, you know what, Bridget, I would like to stop work at 50 and I would like to, which is young, right? And that it's all those problems from a planning perspective. But like, let's say I want to stop work at 50 and I want to just do nonprofit work, which I hear a lot. Or, just do something. Most of our people want to be working, but in some passion thing, right? So something that they don't necessarily need to rely on the income for their lifestyle. So yeah, we spend a lot of time in this space. It looks different for everybody. I've got one client who I've worked with probably about 15 years now, and she is in her 40s, mid 40s, and her goal is at 50. I am retired. So we've been working on this a long time. She's actually had this goal like the whole time. She didn't pivot. And what this has looked like over time has, of course, shifted as she's earned more money and had more ability to save. But she is a super aggressive saver. And everything we've done together over the years is okay, how do we make sure that she's on track to have enough money so that's an option at age 50? She can just walk into the sunset and do something different.
I love that, and I think, like, if you're the super saver, there's 2 problems solved, right? You're supersizing your retirement portfolio, whether it's in your retirement, traditional 401ks or IRAs, but also oftentimes, or like advisedly so, if you're planning to retire at 50, in taxable investment accounts as well. But you have a lifestyle that is probably leaner than some of your peers who are earning the same. And both of those are, kind of gold stars when it comes to retirement readiness that not everybody has. I love retirements where you don't have to, significantly downsize your lifestyle once you retire, ideally. In that person, you might be recommending they spend more in retirement than they're used to spending, not less.
Yeah, you bring up a good point because our clients tend to make some pretty decent money and they have a nice lifestyle.
Mhm.
Most of them would like to continue with this lifestyle when they stop earning. So that is a challenge, right? So they've saved a lot of money in a lot of cases. And if they haven't, we're having a conversation because this is probably going to have to be pushed out a little bit. I mean, realistically. But for folks who have saved, they're still living a good life, Melissa. And so our goal as planners is like, okay, so how much is that cost of living going to be in retirement? And are we on track to be able to continue with that? Now, some expenses fall away, but others come in, like healthcare, right? That's a whole minefield.
For sure. Yeah, and I also think, like, I love those people who just come in and they're like, "This is what's happening. I've got my vision board, like, this age, the day my kid graduates college, we're out of here," whatever the case may be. But I've also, especially as the demands of work have changed, or probably because I'm working with people who have increasing success within their careers, and then, like, with success often comes responsibility, as their roles change and evolve. I have other people who have been incredibly ambitious. I think of one client who, the initial goal was to be a CEO of a publicly traded company. And then and with all the hard work came a lot of success career-wise, and accumulation of wealth. But then, you kind of get to a point, and maybe this is just me talking, living in midlife as a 51-year-old woman. But it's like you have a lot of changing philosophies on what's important to you as well. And then she came back to me and said, that old goal is not my new goal. And I want a lot of balance in my life. And I do want to work and I want to be well compensated, but I'm not, the sky is not the limit. Like the rest of my life, I want to be spending time and focus on. And so I want you listeners to leave space to welcome those, like, whisperings and conversations, but then please share them with someone like Bridget or myself, because we can help you to actuate whatever, you're kind of thinking.
Yeah, that is so interesting because, clients and life and your attitude on life totally changes as you get older, right? So we have another client who we work with also a pretty long time and through different iterations of her career. Like she was a pretty high powered attorney and she did not love law. And she's like, well, maybe if I move to a different law firm, that would be better. So she moved to a different law firm. She's like, this is still not a good fit. And she thought, okay, I'm going to go in house. So all along this trip of like over a decade, she's been trying to find where's she going to be working that's going to give her this fulfilling life, right? And wound up getting married, totally cool, has a bunch of kids now. And she segued out of law into this publicly held company, into a totally different role where she does like government relations. But it's been this never ending quest to balance income. She's a breadwinner in her family and family time and, self fulfillment with her position and her job. And it changes, right? And I can't tell you how many times she's come back and said, you know what, Bridget, what if I just stopped right now? We actually, one year she said, what if I were a letter carrier? We did research on this. She's making many hundreds of thousands of dollars. She's like, what if I pivoted into this job making 44 grand, right? How would that affect our future? And so, long story short, that wasn't an option for the future that she wanted. So we checked it out. And she, repeatedly we check in like, how's it going? What are you thinking? I want to stop this year. I want to pivot, whatever. I mean, the point is, as we go through life and your requirements and your your priorities change in life, right? Like now her priority is for her spouse and her children. And that's
Mhm.
right. But at the same time, she's like, well, I also have to earn money. So I feel like there's this never ending push and pull that we try to navigate with folks to help them get to whatever that ideal life is, but it's always changing.
Constantly changing. And those what if conversations are so important. Also, the thing that occurs to me is when you get serious about your financial well-being, if you started early, for example, or you're in a good place, the so many of us, and maybe this like kind of pivots to the conversation about coast fire, a concept that we're going to introduce in this conversation. But things can, when life pivots, if you've been staying on track or getting ahead because you have ambitious goals for retirement, etc., you have so many options when something else goes bump in the night. So, I know in the labor force today, people are concerned about like, what if AI takes my job? Or if have worked at a company that gives a lot of stock compensation, there's layoffs, rearrangements, etc. Or sometimes we have, personal health challenges, whatever the case, family needs, whatever the case may be. For those who are already, like, planning for that earlier retirement, there are always so many options because you've built in the capacity to have breaks in your work. Um, a lot of times you can work for less or with a different job that has less demands or, things like that, and things would work out just fine because you were honestly ahead of the game.
Right. And that woman I just mentioned who's pivoted a couple times, she did a great job of saving money when she was younger. And so
Mm.
our projections, if we said she doesn't save a dime, and she's in her 40s, if she didn't save a dime between now and let's say age 60, just let her portfolio grow, she would be fine. She does not have to continue to save. She doesn't have to cover their current cost of living and to even pay for 3 kids to go to college. So to your point, if you have the opportunity when you're younger to really save some of this money. And by the way, I mean, it wasn't like she was eating ramen. Like, I mean,
Right.
right? I mean, it's not like you're throwing it all you're doing nothing but saving every dime. Because I am actually not an advocate of that because you don't know life. Like, you've got to live. It just has to be.
Absolutely. Don't wait to live your life.
No, no, because we see things, and as planners, like we've seen everything, and like don't do that. But there has to be a give and take in smart financial choices. But to your point, for our clients who have made those decisions early on to save, they have so many options, Melissa, right? Like they could truly choose to stop saving way earlier than folks and pivot into a different job or just, go on the beach, whatever.
Yeah. Well, so in your newsletter that I was referring to, you mentioned the concept of coast fire. So, can you give me a little lay of the land of what this is?
Yep. So it's actually it's an interesting concept. I think a lot of us know what fire is, which is, you save as everything like you possibly can, and then you have the option to stop work and retire early. So
And it stands for financial independence, retire early, right?
yes. Yes. Sorry. Thank
No, you're good. You're good.
you. And so Coast Fire is really what we see with a ton of our clients. This is like, hey, I'm going to save some money. I want a date at which I can choose to stop earning. I want a date in my life when I can just do whatever I want and I will be financially okay for the rest of my life. So, however, this is like in most cases with our clients, the coast part is they plan to work. So I'm going to stop my high powered crazy job at this date. And then I get to do whatever I want, but I will most likely have some level of income. Those are my people, right? And why? Because these are women who are super high achieving and they don't want to just do nothing. Like they want to do something, but they want it to be like whatever nonprofit that they're passionate about that's going to make them, $25,000, pick your number, but not really enough that that would cover their cost of living. But it's something
More fulfilling. Yeah.
more fulfilling. Like it's totally like they're like, okay, I use this first part of my life to just amass this wealth, which is super cool, and we stewarded this. And now they want to kind of incrementally get to a point where they're doing whatever they want to do and they're earning something, but it's a passion thing, right? So that's really where we see folks where you've basically saved to avoid your cost of living, but you plan to work in some capacity on something that you're passionate about. And that's important because when you're looking at a client's portfolio and you're like, okay, well, how much do we really need for this person? If someone actually plans on having some level of income, you need less from that portfolio, right? Your base will
Mhm.
let that portfolio continue to grow, right? Which we love, right? You don't have to tap in the full amount that you need to cover your expenses. So a lot of that portfolio is going to continue to grow, and then you take out what you need to supplement whatever you're earning.
Yeah, and I think so many times people underappreciate, um, m if there is a stair step down where you're doing a little consulting or you're working part-time or, you do have some income. We have one client who's at a couple Encore retirement many careers, at different places, and each of them has just made her retirement numbers look a little bit better. And it's so there's a double win there. The longer or the less you kind of rely on the portfolio, the fewer years that you kind of max out withdrawals. That's a win. And then also then you give that portfolio room to grow, or maybe you have a mini contribution or something, or smaller contribution as well. So it's like win-win to use a portfolio for your years, as well as maybe either tuck in market returns or even a little bit more money as well. So it kind of has a double impact each year, versus just oh, that was I delayed. Um, the it's the opposite of the cost of waiting, I guess I would say.
Yeah. Now, there's a couple considerations for folks who are kind of subscribing to this coast buyer deal. And that is, there's some wild cards like healthcare. So if you are going to
For
retire
sure.
young, right, let's say 50 is your number, um, there's a few things we need folks to really be on track for. And for example, like, do you know your cost of living? Like, are you really on track? Does this portfolio really set up to cover your cost of living? Do we have an accurate understanding of what that is? Because retirement is going to look different for everybody, right? And a lot of our people, probably all of our people, love to travel. So travel budget's big. Making sure you can cover, basic living expenses, of course, goes without saying. But then healthcare becomes the big wild card. So you're going to retire at 50. That's 15 years before Medicare. And we have spent a lot of time on, okay, what are the options for these folks? Because this is not cheap, right?
This is not cheap, especially if you have, well, I guess there's just an extremely uncertain environment when it comes to subsidies for lower income healthcare brackets. They went way down in terms of subsidies. In 20 between 2025 and 2026. They still exist if you're making very little, or if you're reporting taxes on very little, which could be different things. But one of the fallacies, though, I do think people just assume, "Oh, I can't get health insurance if I'm not employed," which health insurance is out there as long as the Affordable Care Act kind of still exists. You don't you aren't excluded because of pre-existing conditions. You just do pay along with your peers, along with your employers, frankly, significant amounts of money in your 50s and 60s for your health care.
Hmm. You do. And you need to budget that, right? So
You need to plan for it.
right? If this is part of the plan is I'm going to stop work before I'm eligible for Medicare, what is the plan and is that in your budget? Right.
Right. How do you help people to plan for that? So what do you guys do?
Well, we have for sure, you're having this conversation way in advance. Okay, what are the costs we need to worry about? And we have a couple of resources we reach out to because I'm not a Medicare expert.
Right.
And a lot of these Medicare folks actually do gap insurance. They will walk you through, hey, here's the best option for folks. Now, one of the things we usually suggest is you do COBRA for 18 months. Like that's just something we do because then you don't have to change your doctors. It's all good. But you've got to have this lined up before you pull the board on your job, right? Like you have a plan in place. We have already discussed with folks, like we know what is it the exchange, like what is the solution for that person, but we have a clear solution before anything happens. But we've got a number of folks who like concierge doctors. You got to build all this in, and as you know, costs have gone up a lot. Um,
For sure.
right? I mean, so now you're looking at significantly more cost than maybe we were not too long ago. So I use different resources. We send our folks away to these people, and we'll go through what those resources have proposed for them, and then we just add it in the budget.
Yeah, we'll do the same. We, subscribe to a service called Move Health and also have, local representatives, but since our clients are all over the country, we have a place that can do health insurance consulting in all 50 states. So we're not the consultant, but we give our clients access with our subscription. And then also I think, like, those of you who have been using an HSA, maybe you're contributing to it, but then you drain it each year with all the costs that come up for oftentimes for, families, pay that out of cash flow, please, and build up that health savings account if you have a higher deductible health plan, so that you can have an additional resource that would be available, and there for you in early retirement years where it could be extremely valuable.
Yep, we love that HSA because that's just another way for folks to contribute free tax to their future, which is awesome, right?
Right. And I love what you said, Bridget, about really dialing in on what you're spending money on and what of those things will be staying. Like maybe you have kind of earmarked your retirement date to around your kids getting out of the house or something like that. But you really need to go through that budget because I don't know if you feel this way, Bridget, but like if you come to me and all of your investments are in retirement accounts only, your 401ks, then I know how much you're spending. 'Cause I know what your taxes are, it's easy to find that number. You can tell me what you saved last year, we can look at your 1099 for what you're putting away, and, there's often a pretty big number that is being spent, pretty much every dollar that comes into the accounts. For other people, they're sitting on piles of cash or they do have taxable investments, which sometimes are a little bit more difficult to start implementing because you don't just get, like, a drop-down menu, in your 401k account like you do, in your retirement accounts. But what types of accounts, just pivoting as we reemphasize that budget, like, do know your budget and do say what's gonna stay or if the house is gonna be paid off. Like, I personally don't think you have to have every liability on your balance sheet paid off before you retire. There's plenty of times where it may make sense, especially if you have a very low interest rate mortgage, to keep that mortgage and do not bundle everything into it because you may need some liquid capital outside of retirement accounts if you're retiring before age 55 or 59 and a half. But if you have age 50 as your target date, what other, like, kind of techniques for preparing and specifically investment accounts do you recommend that your clients have?
Yeah. So, a couple things there. When we look at a client's portfolio and they're about to stop work, right? And we kind of need to preserve the principal, but we always have to grow it because of inflation, right? We will actually revisit how the money is invested in that. Literally had a client 2 days ago give her notice of retirement to a company. And we've been talking about this for years, but she actually really did it, which is cool. And I said, okay, so look, you're retiring, you're like leaving in July. We're going to change. Let's look at this portfolio, and we're going to change the way the stock and bond mix, the allocation we call it, for her portfolio because it's been a bit aggressive, which was intentional. It was fit for her, but now we need to get it to a different place because now we need to really rely on this. So the first thing we are doing is we call it rebalancing these portfolios back to a little more conservative, a little less aggressive growth, right? Now, you mentioned different account types. So, this client and most of our clients have a variety of types because they're taxed differently, right?
Mhm.
So, we'll have a trust or joint or investment account that is subject to capital gains tax. We'll have an IRA or 401ks that are pre-tax accounts, and then we'll have Roth accounts. So, you got three different types of accounts that are taxed differently. And I think you're probably going this direction with these questions, but we are huge proponents of the Roth conversions.
Mm.
So when somebody stops work and they've got all this pre-tax money, so let's say it's at 401ks, they're finally done, they haven't paid tax on that money. And if you're looking at $1 million portfolio in a pre-tax account, that is not $1 million to this client, right? We haven't paid tax on this yet. So we'll look to see, okay, what's your income level? Depending on where their income's coming from. and what's your tax bracket? And then we'll set off with a proposal to basically incrementally pay tax on all that pre-tax account money and turn it into Roth. So we use different platforms for that, different software that helps us to come up with that strategy for folks. So why do we do this? We do it because we know, especially for our young clients, young retiring clients, over the course of their life, they will have saved so much money in taxes by having converted this pre-tax money to Roth money that they wind up lowering their average taxes paid significantly. That's
Mhm.
money that they now can use as income, right? So the way we look at it is these different buckets of accounts provide different opportunity for the clients. We just have to sit down and look and see, okay, well, what do you have? Start attack. What's our strategy now? Now that you're not earning as much as you were, what are we going to do next? So the portfolio is a big part, right? You got to this place, you saved the money, but now what happens in like phase two of our life when we now turn the spigot on potentially for that portfolio?
I love that. I do strongly encourage people when they're thinking of Roth conversions to think about it carefully. One of my colleagues got a call from a family member recently who was like, "I don't want to pay taxes in my 60s and 70s. We should convert the Roths this year or convert my 401k this year." And it's like, okay, you're at peak earning years. Is not a one and done type of thing because that could really actually backfire and blow up the taxes. So it needs to be handled in a, kind of a thoughtful way. And it often is a multi-year strategy. And then I also, think that you buy a lot of optionality, flexibility if you have funded Roths in the past and or have been saving in taxable accounts. There's ways to get at least your contributions into Roths before age 59 and a half. And your taxable accounts are much easier to access at lower rates in many cases. Not all, but most. And then also be aware, there's different rules for 401ks versus IRAs in terms of if you're retired from your last job at 55, for example, in many cases, you can access your 401k funds without a penalty, which is not the case if you piled everything into an IRA. So you need to be thinking about that as well.
Yeah, and so this is like as you're talking about this, like there's a lot of minefields here, right? Is a
True.
client of ours who gave notice 2 days ago about her retirement. When we put her her 401ks and her IRAs in our system, it is a 10-year process that we will be taking to convert that money to Roth, right? Very intentional. There's a few things we're looking at, tax brackets, income. And so this is not like to your point, you don't want to do one and done because you're going to wind up with crazy taxes. So there has to be a strategy to that. And also, like you said, for folks who are working now, there's a great way to, let's say you can contribute 8,000 to your IRA and immediately convert it to Roth without,
Yes.
we can be doing that incrementally while folks are still working because it's different than this Roth conversion we're talking about. It's just a very incremental um, conversion, if you will, to Roth, right? But to build up that tax-free bucket, which is awesome.
Well, and I also find then there's that preparation question, which is how are where are you gonna find purpose? What are you gonna do with your days? Have any of your friends retired? Like, are they gonna be ready to go on the round the world trips that you're ready to go on? So will there be loneliness and how do you, kind of build up that part of your life? I think some people who've really like, some people just like slip right into living their best life. But for others, it is a significant transition both financially as well as social emotionally that you need to also be preparing for, thinking about, perhaps coached
Yeah.
about.
Coaching for sure. So back to this same woman, part of why she hasn't retired sooner is because she said, Bridget, all I know is work. And I just said, that is not a good answer, right? Like, I hear you, but, you know, let's spend time on what gives you joy, right? You've got a son, you've got a husband, you've got a life. But I think that that is really where coaching comes in. To give yourself permission, Melissa, to finally say, well, what would I really find fulfilling if I could choose anything? a lot of these folks have not given themselves the permission to even have that conversation.
Right.
Because you're just like in it, right? You're in it, you're working, you're getting it done. And some people haven't given themselves this anything outside of life, this outside of work rather. And I think that that's where sometimes it's really helped. We have brought coaches in at Wealth Choice. We do a lot of webinars because our client base is virtual. It's all over the country, and we've brought in different folks just to try to encourage clients to think through what would they like this to be. And it's
Mhm.
harder than it sounds, right? For so many of us, and we know work. Like I got work down, but what would you truly do that's fulfilling and to help people get to that point, right? Like what is your ideal life? Like if you could really do this and you can do this. But we have to help them think about that, right?
Yeah, I know I thrive with structure, so it will take work when I get to the point of retirement. Um, so, that definitely is something where you can't just assume you you slide right in.
No.
One of the interesting conversations I had with a prospective client recently, they were working with the financial advisor that their parents worked with, very successful careers in their 40s. And they said their advisor doesn't have clients that retire early. And really, most of their clients are in retirement themselves. It's an older advisor. And so they didn't feel like they were getting the advice that they would need to be prepared to retire early, which is just such a foreign concept to me. I think because of the stage of life I am in and the clients that I work with. But it was an aha for me too, because I do think in so many cases, investment managers as financial advisors are really just thinking about the accounts and not the bigger picture. I don't want to not throwing anyone under the bus, but it sometimes financial advice in later years is more two-dimensional. Tell me where to send the check and how much money you need. And oftentimes retirees are spending less than they, could spend in their lifetime. So it's a pretty straightforward and still important job. But hopefully our listeners are hearing from our conversation that there are alternatives that they feel like they're in that, advice realm where the accounts are being tended to, but they're not getting the right strategic advice to be prepared for the retirement choices that they intend to make. I don't know if you've ever experienced that.
Yeah, well, no, I have because I started originally in a place where working at a firm where we just really focused on the investments and we weren't having these conversations, Melissa.
Yeah.
These conversations are I don't feel like I could guide someone on their investments without having these conversations. Like what are we solving for? So it's
They'd make the days easier, I honestly think, for you and me, if that's all we did. But I do think there's been an evolution in the potential in financial advice and the level of complexity and the delivery of value where table stakes is making the right investment decisions and allocation choices, as you described. But there is so much more out there that is an opportunity set for if find the right advisor to work with. So I just encourage people to seek it.
yeah, for sure. So for example, we have a client who breadwinner woman, right, married, and in September her husband retired. And he's a couple of years older than her, but not that much. And her goal has always been to work till 70. Now she's 58. So when we had dinner the other night, she said, I have to tell you something. Paul is having a great time in retirement. Yeah. He is like volunteering, he's working out, he's playing pickleball, whatever he's doing, he is like living his best life. And he worked really hard to get there. But he fulfilled the cord. He's like retired. And she said, you know what? I think I want to revisit this. And I said, let's do that, right? Like you've done a great job, you've worked really hard. But to your point, like as we go through this life, like people are going to change and she needs to know, like, are they okay financially? And what is her vision for this next chapter? Because like you and me, like love structure, work a lot, like work, know what you know what to expect. She will need some help on what is her vision for that next chapter. And is it consulting? Is it like the Coast Fire thing? Is it like I still am like have my hands in it sort of? Or is it like we love travel. I'm just out of here. What is her vision? To your point, and we need to have this conversation, and then we need to check in and make sure everything is good financially. But I think that that's where I see planning is so different. We financial planners, you're having that conversation with folks because life is always changing.
It's so true, and there's something so validating, I think, stress relieving and refocusing on the most important part of that conversation. If you, Bridget, are able to tell her, "Look, we don't need to change much if you decide to retire now," or like, "Your vision of consulting works great." Because then she doesn't have to retire, like, she doesn't have to make the choices because of a financial reason. She can really, do the soul searching that she needs to do about the more important things of how they want to spend their lives. How, are there still things she still would like to accomplish? And so I love sometimes when I have clients come in and they have a gap in their intended retirement ages of like, but let me just show you, like, if you both decide to retire at the same time, because one of you both said 55, but there's an age gap, so that means she has to work 3 more years, or he does. Then it's sometimes it's really nice to be like, hey, I love that game plan, but also if you guys chose to like it coincide or make it closer, it totally works. So that's on you, like, and that's not every case. We're, as CFPs, we have a fiduciary obligation to give objective advice. And if we don't see it working out, that's what we need to say. But anyway, we love those conversations. And I just am so appreciative, Bridget, of being able to have this conversation with you, because hopefully our listeners can hear more of the like inflection points and conversations that are helpful to have if you too are planning to retire in your 50s or 60s.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on for this. I love this topic. And I think that, like you said, this is where planners really make our difference, right? What's your vision?
Absolutely.
And let's help you get there. Right.
Well, how can people find you, Bridget, if they're interested in following more, or, reading your newsletter themselves?
Sure. So you can find us at wealthchoice.com. And if you have a question, you can just pose it in there. But that's our website. We have a lot of information on stuff like this, right? So that topic of retiring early or anything that has to do with finances, helping folks make good financial choices. So you can find us there, or you can find me on LinkedIn at Bridget Grimes.
Thank you so much, and appreciate your time, Bridget.
Thank you so much. Love the conversation.
Thank you for listening to the Women's Money Wisdom podcast. If you found value in this episode, the best way that you can support the podcast is to forward an episode to a friend or leave a review. Go to proplan.com and the podcast link to get all the resources and links mentioned. This presentation by Pearl Planning is intended for general information purposes only. No portion of this presentation serves as a receipt of or a substitute for personal investment advice from Pearl Planning or any other investment professional of your choosing. Copies of Pearl Planning's current written disclosure brochure and Form CRS discussing our advisory services and fees are available upon request or on our website platform at pearlplan.com. The information that we share is meant to educate and inspire, not serve as personalized financial advice. Everyone's situation is unique, so be sure to consult with your own financial professional for guidance that fits your life. And just so you know, the opinions shared in this podcast are Melissa's own and those of her guests. They don't necessarily represent any organizations with which Melissa is affiliated. For more important disclosures, please go to our webpage at pearlplan.com.